The great chamber of the galactic hegemony stretched for nearly a kilometer in every direction. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top, and the walls were covered with the flags and symbols of 12 ancient species. This was the heart of galactic civilization, the place where decisions affecting trillions of lives were made every single day. Today, the chamber was full. Representatives from all 12 elder species had gathered in their designated sections, their various body shapes and sizes creating a strange mix of colors and forms. Some floated in special gravity bubbles. Others stood on platforms designed for their unique needs. A few existed as nothing more than projected light, their true forms too dangerous or too fragile to travel. At the center of it all stood a single, human woman. Ambassador Helena Vasquez was 53 years old. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, and her face showed the lines of someone who had spent decades dealing with beings who considered her species to be little more than clever animals. She wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, and she stood perfectly still as the Supreme Arbiter finished reading the ultimatum. The Arbiter was a Kethvari, a species that looked something like a praying mantis crossed with a spider. Its voice was cold and clicking as it spoke the final words of the document that had taken 6 months to prepare, and so, by the united will of the galactic hegemony, the species known as humanity is hereby ordered to submit to full integration within 30 solar cycles. Failure to comply will result in forced compliance through military intervention. The hegemony has spoken. Silence fell across the chamber. Every eye, sensor, and perception organ turned toward the lone human standing in the center of the floor. Helena Vasquez did not move for a long moment. Then she took a deep breath and smiled. The hegemony has spoken, she repeated, her voice calm and clear. Now humanity will speak. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. With a simple tap, she projected a holographic image of Earth into the air above her head. The blue and green planet rotated slowly, its oceans gleaming in the artificial light. 50 years ago, humanity made first contact with the galactic hegemony. We were young. We were inexperienced. We knew nothing about the larger universe or the powers that controlled it. But we learned quickly. She tapped the device again, and the image changed. Now it showed a map of human space, a small bubble of yellow light surrounded by the vast territories of the elder species. For 50 years, we have traded peacefully with every species willing to deal fairly with us. We have shared our art, our music, our literature. We have welcomed visitors to our worlds and sent our own people to study among yours. We have asked for nothing but respect and fair treatment. The Kethvari Arbiter made a sound that might have been laughter. You have also refused every offer of protection, every invitation to join civilized society. You have remained stubbornly independent, like children who refuse to accept the guidance of their elders. Helena nodded. Yes, we have remained independent, and we will continue to remain independent. The chamber erupted in noise, clicking, howling, buzzing, and a dozen other sounds filled the air as the representatives reacted to her words. The Arbiter raised one of its many arms, and silence slowly returned. You understand what you are saying? The Arbiter asked. You are rejecting the protection of the hegemony. You are choosing war. No, Helena said firmly. We are choosing freedom. We are choosing to control our own destiny. We are not choosing war, but we are not afraid of it either. A new voice spoke from the section reserved for the Vorn collective. The Vorn were massive creatures, each one standing over 4 meters tall and covered in thick gray scales. Their representative, a war leader named Grath, stepped forward until he stood at the edge of his platform. Little human, Grath rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. I have seen your military reports. I know what forces you command. 47 warships, 200 defense platforms, a population of 12 billion spread across 8 worlds. He made a sound that was definitely laughter. The hegemony commands over 10,000 warships. We have conquered species far more powerful than yours. This is not a war. This is an execution. Helena turned to face him directly. She was barely 1/5 of his height, but she met his gaze without flinching. The Vorn have always measured strength by counting ships and soldiers, she said. You conquered your section of the galaxy through overwhelming force. You believe that the largest army always wins. Because it does, Grath replied simply. Then you have never truly been tested. Helena smiled again, and something in that smile made several of the nearby representatives shift uncomfortably. Humanity has a different understanding of war. We do not measure strength by what is visible. We measure it by what is hidden. The arbiter clicked impatiently. Enough of this philosophical discussion. Ambassador Vasquez, you have heard the ultimatum. You have 30 solar cycles to comply. If Earth has not submitted by then, the hegemony will take action. This session is concluded. Helena bowed her head slightly. The hegemony has made its position clear. Now I must make humanity's position equally clear. She tapped her device one final time. The holographic display vanished. Humanity rejects this ultimatum completely and permanently. We will not submit. We will not integrate. We will not bow to any species or any collection of species, no matter how ancient or how powerful they believe themselves to be. The chamber fell silent again. This time, the silence was different. It was the silence of beings who could not quite believe what they were hearing. Furthermore, Helena continued, humanity formally warns the galactic hegemony that any military action against our worlds will be met with a response that you are not prepared for. We have no desire for war. We have no dreams of conquest or empire. But we will defend ourselves, and that defense will be absolute. The Kethvari arbiter leaned forward, its compound eyes gleaming. You threaten us. One tiny species threatens. The combined might of the hegemony. I am not threatening you, Helena said quietly. I am warning you. There is a difference. A threat is an attempt to frighten. A warning is an attempt to save lives. I am trying to save lives, yours. She turned and began walking toward the exit. Behind her, the chamber exploded into chaos. Representatives shouted and screamed at each other. Some called for immediate military action. Others demanded that the human ambassador be arrested. But Helena Vasquez walked calmly through it all, her footsteps echoing on the ancient stone floor. At the massive doors, she paused and looked back one final time. 30 cycles, she said. Use them to reconsider. I truly hope you do. Then she was gone. 3 hours later, Ambassador Vasquez sat in the communications room of Earth's embassy, speaking directly to the United Earth Council. Her face was tired, but determined as she delivered her report. They will attack, she said simply. I saw it in their eyes. They cannot accept the idea that a young species would dare to refuse them. Their pride will not allow them to back down. On the screen, Council President James Okonkwo Sr. nodded slowly. He was an old man now, his hair completely white and his dark skin lined with age. But his eyes were still sharp and clear. You did well, Helena. You gave them every chance. Now the decision is theirs. Sir, I have to ask, the hurricane protocol, is it real? The president was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was a strange smile, full of old secrets and ancient plans. 50 years ago, when we first met the hegemony, we knew immediately that we were outmatched. Their technology was centuries ahead of ours. Their numbers were impossible to match. They could have crushed us at any moment, but they didn't. Helena said, double quotes, no. They decided we were too primitive to be worth conquering right away. They thought we would eventually realize our weakness and submit on our own. They gave us time, and we used that time very, very well. He leaned forward, and his voice dropped to barely a whisper. The hurricane protocol is real, Ambassador. It has been ready for 30 years. And if the hegemony is foolish enough to attack US, they will discover that humanity has teeth they never imagined. 2 billion kilometers from Earth, hidden inside a hollowed asteroid in the outer belt, something stirred. The asteroid was called XK7749 in official records. It was unremarkable in every way. Just one of millions of rocks floating in the endless darkness between Mars and Jupiter. No one had ever shown any interest in it. No alien probe had ever scanned it. It was invisible in the most complete way possible. But inside the asteroid, filling almost its entire volume, was something that was not invisible at all. It was simply waiting. The message from Earth Command arrived through a quantum encrypted channel that could not be detected or intercepted by any known technology. It contained only 3 words: Hurricane protocol activated. Deep within the asteroid, lights began to flicker on. Systems that had been dormant for 3 decades started their power-up sequences. Fusion reactors that had been cold for years slowly heated toward operational temperature. And in the central command chamber, a single screen activated, displaying a simple message. Tempest awakening. Crew notification initiated. Time to full operational status, 72 hours. The Hurricane-class warship had been humanity's greatest secret for 30 years. Only a handful of people knew it existed. Even fewer knew what it could. Admiral Kethvorin stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched his armada assemble. It was the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. 4,200 warships from 8 different species had gathered. At the staging point, just outside the boundary of human space, Kethvari destroyers hung in formation alongside Vorn battlecruisers. Delicate Symphora carrier ships floated near the massive dreadnoughts of the hegemony's elite fleet. Every vessel was armed, crewed, and ready for battle. This was the largest military force assembled in over 300 years. The last time the hegemony had gathered such power, they had crushed the rebellion of the Outer Rim and brought 6 species into the fold. Through sheer overwhelming force today, they would add humanity to that list. Admiral, his second-in-command reported. All ships report ready. We can begin the jump to the Sol system at your command. Kethvorin clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. Excellent. What are the latest intelligence reports on human defenses? Unchanged. Admiral, 47 combat vessels, mostly light cruisers and frigates. 200 orbital defense platforms around their inner worlds. Their largest ship is approximately 800 meters in length. The officer paused. They have no chance whatsoever, I know. Kethvorin turned to look at his assembled officers. But we will not be careless. We will not give them even the smallest victory to celebrate. This will be quick, clean, and absolute. Within 3 days, Earth will be under hegemony control, and humanity will learn its proper place in the galaxy. He raised one of his arms in the traditional Kethvari command gesture. All ships, begin jump sequence. Target, Sol system. It is time to teach these humans a lesson they will never forget. Across the armada, 4,200 ships activated their jump drives simultaneously. Space itself seemed to bend and twist around them. Then, in a flash of light that would have blinded any unprotected eye, they were gone. The Sol system had known peace for 50 years. Since first contact with the hegemony, no alien warship had ever entered human space with hostile intent. The trade routes were busy with merchant vessels from a dozen species, and the great orbital stations around Earth and Mars hummed with the constant activity of commerce and diplomacy. All of that changed in an instant. The hegemony armada emerged from jump space at the outer edge of the system, beyond the orbit of Neptune. Their arrival sent shockwaves through every sensor grid in the system. Alarms screamed on every world, every station, every ship on Earth. President Okonkwo watched the tactical display. In the command bunker beneath Geneva, his face was calm, but his hands gripped the edge of the table with white-knuckled intensity. How many? He asked quietly. Over 4,000 confirmed contacts, sir. They're forming up into attack formation. The tactical officer swallowed hard. They outnumber our defensive fleet by more than 80 to 1. Begin the withdrawal pattern. All civilian shipping is to evacuate to the designated safe zones immediately. The defense fleet will engage as planned, sir. The defense fleet cannot. I know what the defense fleet can and cannot do. Commander, the president's voice was steady. They're not supposed to win. They're supposed to buy time. Admiral Sarah Chen had commanded Earth's defense fleet for 12 years. She was 60 years old, gray-haired and absolutely fearless. She had known for her entire career that this day might come, and she had prepared for it as well as anyone could. Now, standing on the bridge of her flagship, the Use Resolute, she watched the hegemony armada advance toward her tiny fleet and felt no fear at all, only cold, calculating determination. All ships, she broadcast, this is Admiral Chen. You know the plan. We are not here to win. We are here to delay. Every hour we buy is an hour the Tempest needs. Stay mobile, stay alive, and make them pay for every kilometer they advance. The defense fleet spread out across the system, forming a thin line between the invaders and the inner worlds. 47 ships against 4,000. It was not a battle, it was a sacrifice. The hegemony armada advanced like a storm of steel and fire. Their leading elements opened fire at extreme range, and the space between the fleets lit up with weapons fire of every color and type. Plasma bolts, particle beams, guided missiles, and exotic energy weapons that humans had no name for streaked across the void. The human ships danced and weaved through the barrage, their smaller size and superior maneuverability allowing them to avoid most of the incoming fire. But they could not avoid everything. One by one, the human vessels began to fall. The destroyer Valiant was the first to die, caught in a crossfire from 3 Vorn battlecruisers. It exploded in a flash of white light, its crew of 200 gone in an instant. The frigate Damascus lasted longer, crippling the enemy cruisers before a direct hit to its reactor core turned it into a miniature sun. The light cruiser Northern Star fought for nearly an hour, her captain refusing to retreat even as her hull was torn apart piece by piece. When she finally went silent, she had accounted for 5 enemy vessels. Admiral Chen watched her fleet die around her, and she kept fighting. The Resolute took hit after hit, its shields failing, its armor buckling, but still it flew, still it fought. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, his voice shaking, "we've lost 32 ships. The enemy is entering the inner system. Time since engagement began, 7 hours, 12 minutes. Chen nodded slowly. "That's better than I hoped. Continue the retreat. All surviving ships, fall back to the Mars defense perimeter." The hegemony armada swept through the outer system like a tidal wave. Defense platforms around Jupiter and Saturn fought bravely, but were overwhelmed within hours. The great shipyards of the asteroid belt were captured intact, their workers fleeing in escape pods as alien marines stormed their corridors. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Keth Voren watched the conquest unfold with growing satisfaction. Minimal losses. His second-in-command reported, "We have destroyed or captured all enemy vessels in the outer system. Human defense capabilities are effectively eliminated. What about their inner worlds? Mars has significant orbital defenses, but nothing we cannot overcome. Earth itself is more heavily defended, but our estimates suggest we can break through within 12 hours of sustained assault." Keth Voren clicked his mandibles. "And there has been no communication from the human government. No surrender offer, none, Admiral. They appear to be waiting for something." "Waiting for what?" "A miracle." Keth Voren made the Kethvari sound of contempt. "They have no miracles left. They have nothing left at all." He turned to his communication officer. "Broadcast a message to the human population. Tell them that their government has failed them. Tell them that resistance is futile. Tell them that if they surrender now, they will be treated fairly. If they continue to resist, we will not be so generous." "Yes, Admiral." The message went out across every frequency, in every human language. It was received on Earth, on Mars, on the colonies of Venus and the moons of Jupiter. Billions of humans heard the alien admiral's words, his voice cold and certain. "People of Earth, your military has been destroyed. Your leaders have abandoned you. The galactic hegemony offers you one final chance for peace. Surrender now, and you will be integrated into our civilization with dignity and respect. Resist, and you will face the consequences. You have 6 hours to respond." In the command bunker beneath Geneva, President Okonkwo listened to the message with a strange smile on his face. "Sir," one of his aides asked nervously, "what should we respond?" "Nothing yet." The president checked his chronometer. "We still have 18 hours before the Tempest is fully operational. We need to buy more time." "How?" "By making them think we're considering surrender." He turned to his communication officer. "Send a reply. Tell them we're convening an emergency council to discuss their offer. Tell them we need 24 hours to reach a decision." "Will they believe that?" "They'll believe what they want to believe. They want to conquer us without a fight. They want us to bow down and submit like good little children. So yes, they'll believe it. At least for a while." Admiral Keth Voren received the human response with something that might have been surprise. "They're actually considering surrender," his second-in-command asked, incredulous. "It appears so." Keth Voren studied the message carefully. 24 hours is too long. Tell them they have 12, and continue advancing toward Earth. Even if they surrender, I want our ships in position to enforce that surrender immediately. The Armada continued its inexorable advance. It passed the orbit of Mars without slowing, brushing aside the last desperate attacks from the remaining human defense platforms. The red planet's orbital stations fell one by one, their defenders fighting to the last breath. By the 10th hour after the invasion began, the hegemony fleet had reached the orbit of the moon. Earth hung before them like a blue and green jewel, beautiful and defenseless. But in the outer system, beyond the asteroid belt, something was changing. Inside the hollowed asteroid that had hidden it for 30 years, the Tempest completed its awakening sequence. Every system showed green. Every weapon was charged. Every crew member was at their station. Captain James Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the most powerful warship ever built by human hands and looked at his crew. They were young and old, men and women, from every nation and background on Earth. They had trained for this moment. Admiral Keth Voren stared at the tactical display for a long moment, his compound eyes fixed on the impossibly large signature moving toward his fleet. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically to gather more information about this unknown vessel that had appeared from nowhere. Analysis complete. Admiral, his sensor officer reported, his voice unsteady. The ship is 3.2 kilometers in length, approximately 1.8 kilometers in width. Its power output exceeds anything in our database. We cannot identify its weapon systems or its defensive capabilities. One ship, Keth Voren said slowly. They have one ship, a very large ship, Admiral, but still only one. The Admiral straightened his posture, forcing confidence into his voice. We have over 4,000. Mathematics does not lie. Send 500 vessels to intercept, destroy this Tempest, and continue the advance on Earth. Yes, Admiral. 500 warships broke formation and accelerated toward the approaching human vessel. They were the fastest ships in the Armada, selected for their speed and firepower. At their head flew the battlecruiser Righteous Fury, commanded by Captain Vecnel, one of the most decorated officers in the Kethvari fleet. Captain Vecnel watched the Tempest grow larger on his display and felt the first stirring of doubt in his stomach. He had fought in a dozen campaigns. He had destroyed ships from 100 different species, but he had never seen anything like this. The human ship was beautiful in a terrifying way. Its lines were smooth and elegant, designed for both speed and power. Its hull seemed to shimmer with some kind of energy field that his sensors could not penetrate. And as it drew closer, he could see the weapons arrays covering its surface like scales on some enormous beast. All ships. He broadcast, weapons free. Fire at will. 500 ships opened fire simultaneously. The space between the fleets filled with light and death. Plasma bolts, particle beams, missiles, and torpedoes streaked toward the Tempest in an overwhelming barrage that would have destroyed any conventional warship 10 times. Over, the Tempest did not slow down. Its shields flared with brilliant blue light as the weapon's fire struck home. Energy crackled across its hull. Explosions bloomed against its armor. But when the first wave of fire ended, the ship was still there, still moving, still completely undamaged. Impossible, Captain Vecnel whispered. Captain. His weapons officer shouted, the human ship is returning fire. The Tempest's weapons spoke for the first time. They did not fire beams of light or bolts of plasma. They fired something else entirely. Something that moved too fast to track and struck with impossible precision. In the space of 3 seconds, 12 hegemony vessels went dark as their engines simply stopped working. Not exploded, not destroyed, just stopped. What happened to those ships? Vecnel demanded. Unknown, Captain. All power systems appear to have failed simultaneously. Life support is still functioning on backup, but they cannot move, cannot fight, cannot do anything. The Tempest kept coming, and as it moved through the formation, it kept firing. Each shot was perfectly placed, striking engines, weapon systems, or power cores with surgical accuracy. Ship after ship went dark and drifted helplessly in space. Captain Okonkwo stood at the center of his bridge, watching his crew work with calm efficiency. Around him, dozens of officers monitored weapons, shields, sensors, and propulsion. Every station was staffed by people who had trained for years for exactly this moment. Weapons status, he said quietly. All primary systems operating at full capacity. Captain, targeting is achieving 98% accuracy. Enemy vessels are being disabled as planned. Disabled. Not destroyed. Correct, Captain. As per your orders. Okonkwo nodded slightly. This was the part that the hegemony would never understand. The Tempest could have destroyed every ship it targeted. Its weapons were more than capable of reducing any vessel in the enemy fleet to scattered atoms. But that was not the point. The point was to demonstrate power while showing restraint. The point was to win without unnecessary killing. The point was to teach a lesson that the galaxy would never forget. Continue as planned, he said. Target engines and weapons only. Leave life support intact. Let them watch. In the enemy formation, panic was beginning to spread. Captain Vecnel watched in horror as his fleet was systematically dismantled by a single ship. 300 vessels already drifted powerless in space, their crews alive but helpless. And the Tempest showed no signs of slowing down. All ships, concentrate fire. He screamed. Target their engines. Target their weapons. Target anything. The remaining 100 ships focused their attacks on the Tempest with desperate fury. The barrage was intense enough to destroy a small moon. Beams and missiles and exotic weapons of every type slammed into the human ship's shields. For a moment, it seemed like it might work. The Tempest's shields flickered. Small explosions appeared on its hull. Captain Vecnel felt a surge of hope. Then the hope died. The Tempest rotated slightly, presenting a fresh section of its hull to the enemy fire. Its weapons adjusted, targeting the attacking ships with terrifying speed. And one by one, the remaining vessels in Vecnel's fleet went dark. The Righteous Fury was the last ship standing. Vecnel watched as his crew fought desperately to keep the ship moving, to keep the weapons firing, to do anything at all that might make a difference. It made no difference. A single shot struck the Righteous Fury's main engine. Power failed throughout the ship. Lights flickered and went dark. Artificial gravity stuttered and then stabilized on emergency backup. Captain Vecnel stood in the darkness of his dead bridge and realized that he had just witnessed something unprecedented. A single human ship had defeated 500 hegemony vessels in less than 2 hours, and it had done so without killing a single member of his crews. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Kethvorin watched the tactical display in stunned silence. 500 ships, including some of the best in his armada, drifted powerlessly in space. The human vessel, the Tempest, continued its advance toward his main fleet as if nothing had happened. Admiral, his second-in-command said carefully, "Your orders?" Kethvorin did not respond immediately. He was trying to process what he had just witnessed. His entire understanding of military power had been based on numbers, on the assumption that a larger force would always defeat a smaller one. That assumption had just been proven catastrophically wrong, but he could not back down. Not now, not with the eyes of the entire hegemony watching. All ships, he said finally. Full attack. Every vessel in the armada. Destroy that ship. Admiral, if we commit the entire fleet, do it. Kethvorin's voice cracked with something that might have been fear. 4,000 ships against one. Even that monster cannot survive those odds. The order went out across the armada. Every ship that could still move began accelerating toward the Tempest. It was the largest single attack in galactic history. A tidal wave of steel and fire aimed at one target. Captain Okonkwo watched them come and felt a strange sadness. He had hoped that the demonstration against the first wave would be enough. He had hoped that the hegemony would see reason, would understand what they were facing, would choose to withdraw rather than continue this pointless battle. But the elder species had not survived for millions of years by admitting weakness. Their pride would not allow them to retreat. Their arrogance would not let them accept that a young species could ever be stronger than them. So be it. All hands, he announced over the ship's communication system. Prepare for sustained combat operations. This is what we trained for. This is what we were built for. Let's show them what humanity is capable of. The Tempest plunged into the heart of the hegemony armada like a hurricane striking a coastline. It moved with speed that seemed impossible for its size, weaving between enemy ships as if they were standing still. Its weapons fired continuously, each shot perfectly aimed to disable without destroying. Shields that should have failed under the combined assault of thousands of ships held steady. Powered by reactors that produced more energy than most planets, ship after ship fell silent. Battlecruisers that had conquered entire star systems drifted helplessly as their engines died. Destroyers that had terrorized 100 species floated powerless in the void. Carriers that had launched millions of fighter craft sat dark and empty. As their power cores went cold and through it all, the tempest danced. Admiral Kethvorin watched his armada crumble and felt his world collapsing around him. Nothing in his long military career had prepared him for this. Nothing in the history of the hegemony had prepared any of them for this, Admiral. His sensor officer reported, his voice barely a whisper, "We have lost. We have lost contact with over 2,000 ships. They are not destroyed. They are simply silent. 2,000 ships." Kethvorin's voice was hollow. "In how long?" 3 hours and 17 minutes, Admiral. 3 hours. In 3 hours, a single human ship had disabled half his armada, and it showed no signs of stopping. The human vessel, the Admiral asked quietly. "What is its status?" "Undamaged, Admiral. Its shields are still at full strength. Its weapons are." The silence on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion stretched for what felt like hours. Admiral Kethvorin stood motionless, his compound eyes fixed on the massive human ship that hung in space before him. Around him, his surviving crew waited for orders that did not come. Finally, his second-in-command approached carefully. "Admiral, the fleet awaits your command. What are your orders?" Kethvorin turned slowly to face him. The proud Admiral, who had led the largest armada in galactic history, looked suddenly old and tired. "Contact the surviving ships. Tell them to hold position. No further attacks. Admiral, if we regroup and coordinate." "Did you not see what just happened?" Kethvorin's voice was sharp. 2,000 ships. 2,000. Disabled in 3 hours by a single vessel. And that ship is still at full combat capability. It could destroy the rest of us whenever it chooses. He walked to the main viewport and stared out at the vast field of drifting, powerless vessels that had once been his invincible armada. "But it didn't destroy us," he said quietly. "That's what I can't understand. It could have killed everyone in those ships. It chose not to. Why would they do that? Perhaps they lacked the capability to." "No." Kethvorin shook his head. "You saw those weapons. They could have targeted life support instead of engines. They could have hit reactor cores instead of power conduits. They were precise enough to disable. They could have been precise enough to kill." He turned back to his crew. "The humans wanted us alive. They wanted us to see what they could do. They wanted us to have time to think about it." On the bridge of the Tempest, Captain Okonkwo waited. His crew maintained their positions, weapons still trained on the hegemony flagship. But the tension in the air had shifted from combat readiness to watchful patience. "Captain," his communications officer reported, "I'm picking up transmissions between the enemy vessels. They're not encrypted. It appears to be confusion, sir. Arguments. Some ships want to continue fighting. Others are calling for retreat. And their flagship." "Silent, Captain. No orders have been issued." Okonkwo nodded. "They're thinking. Good. That's exactly what we wanted." His tactical officer turned from her station. "Sir, if I may ask, why did we spare them? With the firepower we have, we could have ended this war permanently. No more hegemony. No more threat to Earth. Ever." The captain was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "Do you know why I named this ship the Tempest? After the storms on Earth, I assumed. Partly. But there's another meaning." He walked to the main viewport, looking out at the disabled fleet. "A tempest is a powerful storm. It destroys everything in its path. But it also passes. It comes, it rages, and then it's gone. And when it's over, the world is still there." He turned to face his crew. "We could have been destroyers. We could have wiped out the hegemony fleet and sent a message of absolute terror to the galaxy. But what would happen then? Every other species would look at us and see monsters. They would unite against us out of fear. We would have won a battle and lost everything else. Instead," he continued, "we showed them something different. We showed them that humanity has power beyond anything they imagined. And we showed them that we chose not to use that power to annihilate them. We could have been their destroyers. We chose to be their teachers. You think they'll learn? I hope so. But either way, they'll remember. Everyone in those disabled ships will spend the rest of their lives remembering the day that humanity could have killed them and didn't. Back on the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Keth Voran had reached a decision. It was not an easy one. It went against everything he had been taught about war and power and honor. But he was beginning to understand that everything he had been taught might be wrong. Open a channel to the human vessel, he ordered. Admiral, do it. The connection was established, and Captain Okonkwo's face appeared on the screen once again. The human's expression was calm and patient, showing neither triumph nor hostility. Admiral Keth Voran, Okonkwo said, have you made your decision? I have questions first. Keth Voran's voice was steady, though it cost him effort to keep it so. Your ship, how long have you had it? The Tempest was completed 30 years ago. It has been waiting in the asteroid belt ever since. 30 years. Keth Voran shook his head slowly. You had this weapon for 30 years, and you never used it. Never threatened anyone with it. Never even hinted that it existed. Why? Because we built it for defense, not offense. We hoped we would never need it. We wanted to find our place in the galaxy through trade and diplomacy, not through war. You could have conquered us. With that ship, with more like it, we never built more, Okonkwo interrupted. The Tempest is the only Hurricane-class vessel in existence. We never intended to build a fleet of warships. We only wanted one. One was enough to protect ourselves. One was enough to ensure that no one would ever try to subjugate Earth. Keth Voran was silent for a long moment, processing this information. A species that had built the most powerful weapon in the galaxy, and then deliberately chose not to build more. It was so different from everything the hegemony believed that he could barely comprehend it. Your philosophy is strange to me, he admitted finally. The hegemony has always believed that power must be projected, that strength must be demonstrated constantly to maintain respect, and yet here you are. Okonkwo said gently, with your entire fleet disabled. Your philosophy of constant projection brought you to our doorstep with an armada. And now that armada is helpless, yes, Keth Voran's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, it is. We don't want your submission, Admiral. We don't want to rule over you or anyone else. We just want to be left alone. We want to live in peace with our neighbors, including the hegemony. Is that really so impossible? On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, something changed in Admiral Keth Voran's eyes. It was subtle, but his crew noticed it. The stubborn pride that had driven him his entire career seemed to soften, replaced by something that might have been genuine understanding. I need to contact the Supreme Council, he said finally. I cannot speak for the entire hegemony, but I can tell them what I witnessed here today. I can tell them that continuing this war would be foolish beyond measure. That's all we ask. Okonkwo replied. A chance for reason to prevail. There is one thing I must know. Keth Voran leaned forward. The crews of my disabled ships. Will you release them? They were never prisoners. Their life support is functioning. Their ships are intact. We simply removed their ability to fight. Once the hegemony agrees to peaceful terms, we will provide the technical data needed to restore their power systems. You thought of everything. We had 30 years to plan for this day, Admiral. We hoped it would never come, but we were ready. Keth Voran nodded slowly. I will contact the Supreme Council immediately. I will recommend that they accept humanity's terms. I cannot guarantee they will listen, but he paused, looking around at his darkened bridge. But I think they will. When they see what happened here, when they understand what humanity is capable of, I think even the most stubborn among them will see reason. We'll be waiting, Okonkwo said. And Admiral, thank you. For what? For being willing to reconsider. It's harder than fighting. It takes more courage. I respect that. The channel closed. The next several hours were the tensest of the entire conflict. The Tempest remained in position, watching over the disabled hegemony fleet. On Earth, billions of people waited for news, not knowing whether they would face peace or a continuation of the war. In the great chamber of the hegemony, a desperate debate raged between those who wanted to continue fighting and those who had begun to see the Futility of opposing humanity. Admiral Keth Voron's report had shocked the Supreme Council to its core. The tactical data, the sensor recordings, the testimony of thousands of surviving crew members all told the same impossible story. A single human ship had defeated the largest armada in galactic history, and it had done so while deliberately sparing the lives of its enemies. The Voron war leader Grath was the first to speak after the report was delivered. His massive form seemed somehow diminished as he addressed the council. "I have fought wars for 200 years, he rumbled. "I have conquered worlds. I have destroyed fleets. I thought I understood power. I was wrong. What do you suggest?" The Kethvari arbiter asked. "That we surrender? That we bow to these humans as we have never bowed to anyone?" "No." Grath's voice was thoughtful, not angry. "The humans don't want us to bow. They never did. They wanted us to respect them as equals. And today, they proved that they have earned that respect. One ship. They have one ship. One ship that defeated for thousand," Grath replied. "One ship they kept hidden for 30 years because they hoped they would never need it. One ship they used to disable our fleet rather than destroy it. Does that sound like the behavior of a species that wants to conquer us?" The debate continued for hours. Old prejudices died hard, and many in the council could not accept the idea of treating humans as equals after centuries of viewing them as primitives. But gradually, the weight of evidence began to shift opinions. The recording of Captain Okonkwo's message to Admiral Keth Voron was played for the entire council. His words, calm and reasonable, offered exactly what he had said: peace, trade, mutual respect. Nothing more, nothing less. Finally, the arbiter called for a vote. The question before this council is simple. Do we continue? 5 years had passed since the Battle of Seoul. The great chamber of the galactic hegemony looked different now. The flags and symbols of the 12 elder species still hung from the walls. But there was a new addition. Beside them, in a place of equal honor, flew the blue and green flag of United Earth. Ambassador Helena Vasquez stood at the central podium. Older now, her hair completely gray, but her eyes still sharp and determined. Around her, representatives from 13 species listened in respectful silence. 5 years ago, she began. This council issued an ultimatum to humanity: submit or be destroyed. You sent the largest armada in galactic history to conquer us, and we defeated that armada with a single ship. She paused, letting the memory sink in. But we didn't destroy you. We could have. We chose not to. And in the 5 years since that day, we have proven that our choice was not weakness. It was strength of a different kind. The chamber was absolutely silent. Every being present knew the history she was recounting. Many of them had been there when it happened. Admiral Keth Voron himself sat in the Kethvari section, his compound eyes fixed on the human ambassador. Trade between Earth and the hegemony has increased by 300%, Helena continued. Human medical technology has saved millions of lives on a dozen worlds. Our artists and musicians perform in the capitals of every elder species. Our scientists work alongside yours in research that benefits us all. She smiled, and it was a warm smile, full of genuine affection. We did not come to the stars as conquerors. We came as neighbors. And finally, after so much misunderstanding and conflict, I believe we have become exactly that, the arbiter. The same Kethvari who had read the ultimatum 5 years earlier rose from his seat. Ambassador Vasquez speaks the truth. The hegemony has learned much from humanity in these past years. Not just technology, not just science, but something more fundamental. We have learned that power is not the same as wisdom, that strength is not the same as virtue, and that a species that chooses mercy when it could choose destruction is not weak. It is evolved. He turned to face the assembled representatives. I move that the galactic hegemony formally recognize humanity as a full and equal member of our community, not as a subjugated species, not as a junior partner, as equals with all the rights and responsibilities that status entails. The vote was unanimous. Deep in the asteroid belt, the Tempest waited in its ancient berth. Its systems were dormant, its crew scattered across Earth and the colonies. Captain James Okonkwo had retired from active service 2 years earlier, accepting a teaching position at the Naval Academy where he trained the next generation of officers. But the ship remained ready. Its reactors could be brought to full power within hours. Its weapons could be activated in minutes. If Earth ever needed it again, the Tempest would answer. Most people hoped it never would. On Earth, life had returned to something resembling normal. The scars of the invasion had healed quickly. The destroyed defense platforms had been rebuilt. The damaged orbital stations had been repaired. And the memories of those terrifying days when alien warships had darkened their skies were slowly fading into history. President Okonkwo Sr. had passed away 2 years after the battle, peacefully in his sleep, knowing that his life's work had been accomplished. The Hurricane Protocol that he had championed for 30 years had saved humanity. His legacy was secure. His son, Captain James Okonkwo, stood at his father's grave on a quiet hillside in Lagos, looking out at the sunset over the Atlantic. "We did it, Dad," he said softly. "We saved them all, every single one of them. Just like you always wanted." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the distant sounds of the city below. Children were playing in the streets. Families were gathering for dinner. Ships were lifting off from the spaceport, heading to destinations across the galaxy. Peace. That was what his father had always wanted. Not conquest, not domination, just peace. The chance for humanity to live and grow and explore without fear of annihilation. James smiled and walked back to his car. He had a dinner appointment with Ambassador Vasquez, who was visiting Lagos for a conference on interspecies cultural exchange. They would eat and drink and tell old stories about the days when they had faced the impossible and somehow prevailed. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he would think about the Tempest sleeping in its asteroid, waiting for a call that he hoped would never come again. In the hegemony capital, Admiral Keth Voren had found a new purpose in life. After the battle, he had resigned his military commission and dedicated himself to a different kind of work. He became the galaxy's most vocal advocate for peaceful relations with humanity. He traveled from world to world, speaking to military academies and political assemblies about what he had witnessed. He showed them the recordings of the Battle of Seoul. He explained how humanity's restraint had been more powerful than any weapon. "They could have killed us all," he would say, "every single being in that armada. And they chose not to. That choice, that single decision to spare lives rather than take them, changed everything. It made me realize that everything I had believed about power was wrong." His message was controversial at first. Many of the elder species still clung to their old ways of thinking. But gradually, over the years, more and more beings began to listen. The Voren, the most warlike of the elder species, were surprisingly receptive. War leader Grath became one of Keth Voren's strongest allies, traveling alongside him to spread the message of restraint and mercy. "We Voren have always respected strength," Grath would rumble at these gatherings. "But the humans showed us a new kind of strength. The strength to hold back, the strength to show mercy, the strength to win without destroying. That is true power on Earth." A new generation was growing up in a world their parents could never have imagined. Human children studied alongside young beings from a dozen different species. Human students traveled to alien universities. Human scholars contributed to galactic knowledge in fields ranging from art to science to philosophy. And in the history classes, they learned about the Hurricane-class warship that had saved them all. The story of the Tempest had become legendary across the galaxy. Children of every species knew about the great ship that had defeated an armada without killing. They learned about Captain Okonkwo and his decision to disable rather than destroy. They understood, even at a young age, that humanity's greatest victory had come not from their weapons, but from their character. The Tempest itself had become a symbol, not of military power, though it certainly possessed that. It had become a symbol of the idea that there was always another way, that violence was not the only answer, that mercy could triumph over vengeance. Some said it should be turned into a museum. Others argued that it should be dismantled entirely, its weapons destroyed, its threat removed. But the majority believed it should stay exactly where it was, hidden in its asteroid, ready if needed, sleeping if not, a reminder, a promise, a guarantee. 100 years later, when the historians wrote about this period, they would call it the beginning of the golden age of galactic civilization, the moment when the elder species finally accepted humanity as equals. the moment when the endless cycle of conquest and subjugation was broken. They would write about Ambassador Helena Vasquez, who faced down the mightiest armada in history with nothing but words and courage. They would write about Captain James Okonkwo, who commanded the most powerful weapon ever built and chose to show mercy. They would write about Admiral Kethvorin, who had the wisdom to learn from defeat and the courage to change his beliefs. And they would write about the Tempest itself, the Hurricane-class warship that humanity built in secret, hid for 30 years, and used exactly once. The ship that proved that true strength is not the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to know when not to. But all of that was in the future. On this evening, as the sun set over Lagos and the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, an old captain walked toward a restaurant where an old friend was waiting. The war was over. The peace was holding. The galaxy was learning, slowly and painfully, that there might be better ways to resolve conflicts than through conquest and domination. And somewhere in the asteroid belt, the Tempest waited in silence, its hull dark, its weapons cold, its mission complete. Humanity had built a hurricane and taught it to be gentle. That was their true victory. Not the ships they had disabled, not the battle they had won, not the treaties they had signed. Their true victory was proving to the galaxy and to themselves that they could have annihilated their enemies and chose instead to save them. The lesson had been learned, and the galaxy would never forget it.